Let's talk supply chain. So, welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I am excited to have you with me today. I mean, Cavallo says that distribution is literally in its DNA, and that really resonates with me. I always say that supply chain is in my blood, and I love to have conversations with people who are as passionate about the industry and as dedicated to it as I am. And so it's really exciting. I'm looking forward to finding out more and sharing with our listeners today about who you are, what you do, how you help your customers. I mean, there's so much to talk about. So let's just dive right in. But
Yeah.
before we get into where Cavallo is right now, I just want to talk a little bit about the history and the journey that the company has been on.
hmm
So it was established as SalesPad back in 2008 after Pete Erdley, the founder, became frustrated by the limitations of the technology he was working with. So,
hmm
what was it that Pete saw that made him decide to do something about it? And how did SalesPad become Cavallo?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a great starting spot. So, one of the things that Pete's organization is a distribution organization. He sold physical goods from a warehouse to his customers, and really kind of the B2B space. So primarily looking at other organizations that are trying to sell products, to other just organizations. So he had an ERP system, Microsoft Dynamics GP.
Okay.
And when you look at ERP systems, they're really good at making sure that you kind of follow all the rules, right? So you're keeping your general ledger accurate, you're keeping your sub ledgers accurate, and at the end of the day, you can confidently say, "Hey, I'm Uncle Sam. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do," right? Like
Right.
that's their job is like making sure that you're compliant. And so ERPs are often forced to solve a lot of different problems, and kind of as a result, they're not able to be excellent at a few, a few key things. They're excellent at financials, and so they're really powerful to build off of.
Hmm.
Kind of as a foundation, but they miss many of the things that really differentiate a business, like helping you manage your customer relationships. You don't really have a kind of a central understanding of your order statuses. Being able to automate overly manual and error-prone processes, things like that, are
Yeah.
are really kind of struggling if you are just solely relying on your ERP system. And so he built a custom application. He was like, all right, I've had enough. I'm gonna go try and build a custom application like any good business leader does, just trying to solve
Hmm.
problems ultimately. And
Yep.
he built that out, and he had a few people try it out, and it grew and grew and grew from there, kind of organically. And people were
Nice.
like, "Well, I think we've got a business here." And so, just kind of as it grew, we kind of recognized that our organization outgrew the sales pet name a bit.
Yeah.
Um, as it didn't really represent all of what we were doing. Think
Okay.
about exclusively sales, and then you add the pad at the end of it.
Yeah.
People were like, "All right, well, what do you do? Are you a sales exclusive tool?" And really, what we were is kind of an automation focused organization that's trying to, make processes go a lot smoother, move things through the process in a way that helps everybody in the organization do what they need to do. So um, but yeah, that's a little bit of our history.
I love that history. And you talk a lot about bringing relationships together as a part of that automation and just automating and solving business problems, right? And that's
Yeah,
where all really great businesses start. And so I appreciate you running us through that history because I love a good story.
yeah.
What is it then that Cavallo does, and how do you help your customers?
Yeah, good question. So we typically break it up into kind of like a pyramid structure where, as we've been talking about, the ERP is really kind of the base. That's the foundation of your business. It has a lot of the data
Hmm.
that we can really take full advantage of using kind of the rest of our capabilities. And so that's kind of the foundation that we pretty much always build off of. And
Okay.
then from there, we kind of have user-friendly productivity tools. So when we think about if you're a CSR or customer service rep at a distribution organization, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? You're getting POs from your customers. You're getting questions about landed cost. You're getting weird questions about all sorts of different things, and really trying to answer questions with accuracy so that you can speak articulately to your customers and keep them happy.
Yeah.
And if you're a sales rep and you're forced to, look at underlying financials to be able to answer some of those questions, it's really challenging. And so we surface that information in kind of an intuitive way and just aggregate information in the right place at the right time. And so that's kind of the second layer, that those user productivity tools. And then really the next layer on this pyramid is automations. So being able to design a process and curate a process. What happens so often is that organizations design a process, and then from there, it's the exact same process for the next decade, right?
Right.
um, and so people don't actually fix it. They're like, well, this is what we've always done. And so we wanted to build something that made it so that they could iteratively improve, with tools like ours. And so that's kind of that next layer of just being able to design that process, iteratively improve. And then, all right, you have all of this data,
Hmm.
your process data, customer data. How do we start to digest all of that information and really
Yeah.
kind of surface it in a hyper intuitive way? And we have a lot of different analytics applications that are focused on, process analytics is kind of where we've started for that too. Is if we talk about all these workflow automations, really analyzing those,
Hmm.
how are those performing? Are they performing well? Are they performing poorly?
Right.
So you can, like, a really good example is like if you're, trying to, you know, move product out of your warehouse, and you're trying to evaluate your picking speed.
Hmm.
You could look at one person that's trying to pick product and another person that's trying to pick product and say, okay, this person takes an hour to pick the product, this person takes 10 minutes. But then
Right.
you realize the person picking for an hour, they're picking a fridge, right?
Right.
And the person that takes 10 minutes is picking a toothpick or something, right? And
Mhm.
so making sure that we're giving context to all of the processes is something that we do really well too. So
Well, and that's amazing. I mean, that's definitely what we need on the distribution side. I mean, especially as e-commerce ramps up, right? It's all
yeah.
like, and then you've got the Amazon effect, right? And it's all going to have an effect on how efficient we are, not only
Hmm.
as people, but as warehouses, as getting the product out to the customer and the customer experience that they get from those deliveries and how fast they get their product and things like that actually make the difference of whether they come back to purchase.
Yeah.
And so the things that you're talking about are really important. But the piece that I like the most is around context,
Hmm.
right? Is it's that context piece. You're
Yeah.
right. If somebody is picking a refrigerator over a toothpick, I mean, those are two very different scenarios. And in order for us to be able to use that data and create those efficiencies and those workflows, the processes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you need to have all the information to make those right decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things that we do with our with a workflow engine is a lot of those context settings, right? So if you can build out really intuitive logic that says, all right, if this document is from a specific customer and
Hmm.
it's over $1,000, or if it's over $10,000, depending on your business model, right? Like you may want to triage that order and do something special with it, based off of kind of the context that you've given and the context and the priority that you've set as an organization.
Right.
And so you can do that as well. And then, kind of back to Pete, one of the things that he did was like, all right, he was finding that he was letting margin go out the door for unimportant customers. It wasn't a loss leader product or anything like that. It was just he's flat out letting margin go out.
Hmm.
So, we put in a business rule that says, okay, don't do that if these conditions are true, right? Like, don't give away margin if we don't think it's going to lead to further sales down the road.
Right.
And oftentimes that's just really hard to do. So,
It absolutely, absolutely is. And so you've got a few core solutions that
mhm,
I'd like to sort of introduce and talk about today so that the audience can really get an understanding of what you can do for them.
yeah.
So let's start with Distribution Cloud. You say it's built by distributors for distributors. So
Mhm.
it's really addressing those deep industry issues. Talk us through that. What does it do? How does it work? What can the customer do inside the solution? And what are some of those benefits?
Yeah, good question. So, there's really just a few core components to distribution cloud. One is really mission control, which is really kind of the home of the business, right? The reason we called it mission control is we saw some pictures, of like the people at NASA like viewing the status of their business, and you can see all of the things happening for a specific,
Okay,
space journey, right? And
gotcha.
and really, that was kind of our goal is having a place for all of your documents to live. And so like I have kids, and I can walk into my kid's room, and I'm not going to have any idea where any of anything is, right? And then they walk into their room, and I'm asking them to find one thing, and they can find it in a random corner, and
Right.
they're good to go. That same basic concept happens in distribution, right? So if you've got somebody in that's getting ready to pick a document, we've got an order that's coming through, we're ready to ship it out. The warehouse person knows exactly what they need to do. um, but what about the people that are before or after that step in the process? Are you
Right.
okay for the people after it? Or do when a document or when a customer is ready to be fully invoiced? Maybe not. If you're a
Mhm.
sales rep and a customer calls you and says, "Hey, what's the status of my order?" Well, we received your order, but that's not often good enough, right? Like
Right.
back to your point about like being able to provide an excellent customer experience. It's
Mhm.
having that context, knowing where things are, and so that's really the goal of mission control is to help the organization have a single source of truth for the status of documents. How are they fulfilling, and how are things going? And then there's the underlying workflow engine that's kind of all behind that powers that says, okay, where should orders go and why should they go there? So if it's an important customer, back to that example, or if the order has certain product on it, or if it's you're going to actually use a 3PL to send it out, right? Well, then let's actually make sure that gets sent automatically. And there's
Mhm.
all sorts of manual tasks that could be happening in there, like email the order confirmation,
Right.
email the invoice, that really could be automated and should be automated by systems that a lot of people just aren't doing quite yet. And so we can do that and automate all of those processes. That's that no code workflow engine that's kind of underneath all of the base of mission control.
Mhm.
But still, like exception handling too, right? So
Yeah.
you may just want to automatically invoice somebody, but you may like want to use that as a potential touch point
Mhm.
opportunity for your sales team.
Yeah.
And so, if there's a certain sales rep associated to that document, you can write rules that say, okay, let's actually, the document's more than $10,000. I want to have my sales rep give them really a high touch, a kind of a personalized experience for that.
Mm.
You could design a process around that. And so what we see happening a lot then are really with mission control, because everybody has kind of clear accountability for what they should do, is
Mhm.
dramatically reducing the cycle time, right? Like the time it gets you to or takes you to move product out the door, or sales per employee. Because people can, you're not kind of trying to chase down answers to questions. You
Right.
can go back to selling, and
Yeah.
so that's kind of the base of what distribution cloud does.
Yeah, and you're bringing everybody together. That's what I like. Like I talk about how collaboration is the future of business. And so
Hmm.
what you're doing is you're tying in all of the different departments within that particular organization and bringing them in at certain points, right? You're using your tool, or companies and your customers are using that tool to bring everybody in at the moments that are going to make the difference to the business's bottom line,
Yeah, exactly that.
which I
Um,
really, really appreciate, and I think it's amazing.
yeah.
So, the customer has all of the information, right? Which is what you were just talking about. They have
Mhm,
everything they need in the distribution cloud platform. Then it ties into the analytics cloud platform, which is what you had mentioned earlier.
mhm.
Now, that, from what I understand, allows them to take actionable intelligence and insights to help optimize that process ongoing, right? So, talk to us about this solution and how it helps your customers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've I've been talking about the workflow stuff a lot, right? You
Yeah.
you design a process, you say this is what should happen, this is the context, this is why it should happen, and you design that process, and you've put a ton of of thought into, all right, this is the most effective process for my organization.
Mhm.
Um, but from there, you're still going to inevitably run into scenarios where you have bottlenecks or issues where, okay, a document is stuck in picking. Why is it stuck in picking?
Mm.
Analytics Cloud is really intended to kind of tell that story, with ultimately next level context as far as, okay, we know that these documents typically spend about an hour in my picking queue or within an hour in my process, or maybe it's a manager review, right? My manager has to
Mhm.
typically go ahead and approve documents that are above $10,000. Um, and so you get all of this information and you can see that that's happening, but what should you do about it? And so what Analytics Cloud is really starts to dissect it, set benchmarks so you can figure out, all right, has this document been within
Okay.
this process for too
Yeah.
long?
Mhm.
um, maybe maybe not. Back to kind of the fridge example, right? Like you
Right.
could say, okay, it's been in picking for 30 minutes, I'm looking pretty good so far, right? I don't have a big issue with that. But if it's just a little pen or something, well, maybe you have issues with that. It shouldn't take an hour to pick a pen. And so this surfaces this information.
Mhm.
And but that might be a really good spot to start. Now you still have to remember to come to Analytics Cloud. And so what we do is say, all right, uh, how do we turn this into all right, Alex has to go remember to check out all of this information, into kind of a more active tool and less of a passive tool. And so we
Right.
we have kind of a dynamic alert engine on top of that that
Love
allows you to, like, all right, proactively, okay, this condition has been met,
that. Mhm.
send Alex a notification, right? All right, it's been in there for an hour. Alex should be notified of that. But now that it's been there for 2 hours, let's go ahead and tell Sarah that the document's been in there for 2 hours. And so you can escalate it, right? And say, okay, all
Right.
right, I think this is an issue. Maybe, maybe not. And it really just kind of dissects all of that information and makes it really, really accessible. Um,
Well, and I almost think about, you were saying that you might need a signature over a certain amount of, like a certain dollar amount or something like
yeah.
that. And so it sends the document to them. And if they haven't signed it, instead of you being like, hello,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
kind of like ping. It does it
Exactly.
for you, so then you don't have to worry about it or have to remember to remind somebody about it. It reminds that person for you, and I think it also takes that uncomfortableness out of really having to chase somebody for something too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like if a bunch of our customers set up like sales rep alerts, so like
Right?
a document has been in my warehouse. Like let's say,
Mhm,
all right, the sales rep did the job, they
mhm,
sold it, things are looking good, it gets into the warehouse, but it's
mhm.
been in the warehouse for 3 days. Um, and so what we do is send out an alert to the sales rep, to say, hey, this document has been in 3 days. From there, right, there's a lot of different things you could do. You could go
Yeah,
talk to the customer. You
mhm.
could go talk to the warehouse manager and say, hey, what's up? Why is this order sitting here for so long? And so that proactive alerts engine, it's been cool to see how people have been using it.
Yeah, and instead of, like a week later, the customer coming and being like, "Where is it?" If that's the case,
Yep.
you can do that in a smaller amount of time. And that's where really a lot of the value in this lies, right? I mean,
Hmm.
businesses are generating data left, right, and center, but often the lack of capability to understand it, translate it into something that they can actually use, right?
Yeah.
That's where I think a lot of the hiccups lie. So, do you think there's been a shift in the last couple of years from a focus on big data and complex solutions to a preference on sort of stripping things back to easy, simple processes with a focus much more on the power of visibility? The power of that pinging, the power of that proactiveness. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like you can. Yeah, one of the things that is often a struggle for business leaders is just being able to turn data, right? Like, so it's not that hard to just like go get data,
Right.
but
So
like
much
you
of
can
it.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of data out there for businesses, and they often
Mhm.
recognize that. But okay, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
You often have to hire a data analyst, or you have to hire somebody that's an expert in,
Mhm.
um, you know, being able to move data from one tool to another, and you're not often getting kind of real-time information. And I think you see this in the B2C space and in the B2B space, where like people just want really accessible information. And like
Yeah.
I can think like on Sunday, like sometime on Sunday morning, my watch like shames me about how much screen time I've had. uh and like like imagine if I wanted to evaluate like how much screen time I have had on my phone. Like it would
Yep.
take me,
Where you
I
spend the
mean,
most time, maybe
yeah.
Candy Crush, I don't know.
Exactly. So like it would take me forever to like figure out, all right, I'm investing a ton of my like personal time in this specific thing. Do I want to do that? But no, now my watch just tells me like, hey, stop doing that as much. So
Yeah.
that same thing happens, for distribution. Like you have a limited amount of resources. Are you spending your time where it makes a difference?
Mhm.
And I don't think organizations are doing that as much as they should. Or when they are doing it, they kind of take a kind of a baby step into it. Just say, all right, you know, let's start with a small thing. And I think that makes sense. Like, let's start with a small problem and scale it from there.
Mhm.
Um, but then that's kind of where they stop. They don't start to further enhance their business with, additional kind of analytics tools.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, right? I mean, we're so used to seeing things in our personal lives, going back to your example there with the phone and the screen time. I
Hmm.
often use Uber, right? And being able to see where the driver is and things like that. We want to take the simplicity. We want to take the innovation. We want to take the tools that we're using on a day-to-day basis because we know that it's there, we know that it's possible, right?
Hmm.
And bring it into our business and professional lives,
Yeah.
because we know we've seen the possibilities, and so we know it's there, and it's just a matter of bringing it all together, figuring out what's going to work for the day to day, the business, the professional, that kind of thing,
Hmm.
and putting it into place.
Yeah.
Part of the dread around new technology and bringing in a technology partner and things like that is also really around integration,
Mm.
right? A lot of people are just sort of like, "Ooh, this is going to take months and I'm going to have so much resources. It's going to cost me a boatload of money." And so, one of the questions that I love to ask, companies like yours is, what does the integration look like? How do you work with other systems? How long does the implementation, like,
Mhm.
how easy is it to get started with you?
Oh yeah. So this is an area where we spend a lot of time kind of early on in researching as we were thinking about kind of our products. Like how do we, deliver time to value as fast as we possibly can? And because we've talked about like switching like ERPs, that's kind of the foundation, right? Like nobody likes to switch ERPs. It's
Right.
kind of
True.
like getting a root canal. You really only do it if you have to, and if you're in tremendous pain, right? And so it's a struggle, and so people are staying on the kind of the same ERP for a really long time, and so the question often becomes, okay, how can I get value in other ways? What other tools can I use to kind of enhance this core application? And so like back to like as we were building this, we're like, all right, how can we deliver this? And so for each of our products, it's a 15-minute install for distribution
Okay.
cloud and for analytics cloud. We typically tell people though that it's going to be about a week
Okay.
of
Manage
implementation.
expectations.
And the reason we say that is because for all of our onboardings we start with kind of a design process where
Hmm.
like let's have that business conversation, let's talk about your process. And as you were talking about, like we live and breathe distribution, we know it really well. And so
Yeah.
we like to talk to customers, talk to organizations, and say, okay, this is a great way to do it. We've noticed other people do it this way. And then that way, our customers can really start to define a really interesting process that makes sense
Mhm.
for them, but
Right.
also takes, best in class uh, ways of doing things from other organizations. So we always start with the design process, and that takes about a week though, as just we talk about saying, okay, let's what should we do? How do you want to design this? And then we also train a little bit on kind of it's a no code solution, so we heavily believe that you should be able to improve from there
Okay.
yourself, but it's helpful to just kind of get people rolling for in about a week.
Right. That's awesome. A week is great. I mean, some of the technology partners that I'm talking to are, months.
Yeah.
And, I can only imagine the weight of that, right? On an
Yeah.
organization and the supply chain professionals or even the business professional that brings a solution like this to the table. And then it's
Hmm.
like, oh no, it's going to take us a couple of months to get up and started.
Yeah.
But you're saying that it's going to take a week, which is amazing. And I'm sure your customers absolutely love that. And because of that, I want to change tracks a little bit. I want to talk about your ethos and your commitment to the community because I know that
Hmm.
it's important to you guys to make a positive impact. You're still very often connected to your roots. And I think when we talk about sustainability, organizations, often forget that people are or should be a huge part of that responsibility. So, talk to us a little about your ethos and your community or your commitment to that community.
Yeah, totally. So, we are absolutely a people first organization. When I started with Cavallo a few years ago, one of the big things that kind of attracted me to the organization was really the organization's, there's a lot of really intelligent people here. They're really smart, but small egos. Like we let good ideas, big ideas that are kind of like supported, really kind of win.
Oh, good.
And at the same time, what we can do is work together to solve really challenging problems.
Hmm.
This is kind of more on the the actual software side, but there's a lot of really compelling problems that we as kind of as a society need to solve,
Yep.
and a lot of those things can fortunately be solved by software. And so it's helpful to kind of recognize that if you look at distribution as a whole, like there's a ton of things that we can improve. We can improve people's quality of life with our software. We can improve, this sounds kind of wild, but we can improve, like, if you're a customer service rep, like you can imagine that if you are, if you get all those hard questions, like employee turnover goes down oftentimes if you like buy if we like
Right.
we've seen it over and over, like people like, all right, it's less miserable, right? Because I can use your software and I can, look smart in front of my customers and clients. But
Right.
even above and beyond that, we actually, I missed it. We just had a blood drive, which I love, and then everybody that wanted to give blood got fed pizza. I love that type of thing too. So
Yeah.
it's a cool organization for sure.
And really important sort of focusing on the shortages that are out there right now. I mean, there's shortages across all sort of industries, including for blood.
Yeah,
And so it's great to see that your organization and the people within your organization are coming together to be able to help, not only solve the challenges through your technology, but solve the challenges through your commitment to the community as well.
yeah.
So let's get into the juicy bits. I want to hear about who your ideal customer is. So I'm in the audience, I'm listening to this conversation, really like what Cavallo is all about, but
Mhm.
who am I? Right? Am I a
Yeah.
particular size, a certain industry? Am I distributing, a certain volume? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I'm in product management, and I could totally nerd out about like marketecture and talk about that for hours and go into like psychographics and technographics. I love talking about that type of stuff. Sometimes
Okay, so if any,
some
so if
people's
any,
eyes glaze over.
so if anybody in the audience is about that, contact Alex outside of
Yeah,
this episode,
right.
and he'd be happy to talk to you about those things.
But yeah, really, we see ourselves. We help a lot of different organizations, a lot of different verticals, with really a wide range in order volume, right? So
Okay.
we have consumer packaged goods or customers that are sending out thousands and thousands of orders a day,
Mhm.
and then we've got small organizations that are doing like 20 orders a day. Um, and what they typically have in common, though, is a really complex process. So for a lot of our like organizations that are like B to B to C, or that like they're selling to large box retailers, are they have complexity with things like EDI. okay, like, a big box retail outlet wants to do business with me. They're
Mhm.
forcing me to do EDI. Okay, there's
Yeah.
a ton of nuance to EDI and what that actually means and how to actually manage that entire process. And so
Yeah.
we can help manage that process for those types of organizations. And then on the lower volume side, it's organizations that have, long cycle times, right? Like you get, 5 orders a month, but each one of those orders is, $200,000 or something,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
um, and so there's different things that need to happen there. You have, lots of demand planning. You have to come up with a purchasing plan. All right, do you have that inventory in stock for that size of order? Probably not. So now you're starting to deal with customers over or vendors overseas.
Mhm.
What does that actually look like? How are you communicating? How are you then sending information back to your customers so you can ultimately deliver a better customer experience? And so the big thing that people have in common across these verticals, across size, is really complex processes that need to be managed and improved on. So they've got longer than desired cycle times. They have lack of visibility into kind of their processes. Historically, we've done really well with organizations that are in like heavily regulated industries, right? So if you're in food distribution, you're having to keep track of like lot details, or like,
Right.
all right, now we're running into a whole another level of complexity.
Mhm.
Um, and if you see margin kind of eroding from your business slowly, or just frankly, like if you don't know what your margin is, um, outside of a financial thing, like if you know it on a monthly on your P&L, okay, that's one thing.
Right.
But do you know what margin left today? Those are the types of organizations that we can really, really help.
Awesome. I love that. And then let's get into the case study, right? Because you've got a lot of exciting stories on your website to choose from. But
Mhm.
can you bring one of those to life for us? So, sort of paint us a picture of how you've worked with one of your customers. What was the challenge they came to you with? Which solution were they working with you on? And what was the impact or ROI of that solution?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. So, we actually just did a site visit with a customer in Ohio, just a couple of months ago, and they had recently migrated from one ERP to Microsoft Dynamics Business Central, which is Microsoft's kind of mid-market ERP solution. It's
Hmm.
it's really powerful. It has really good bones, but yeah, the organization really needed help, kind of understanding their entire process. So they were
Okay.
actually, we talked about low volume. They are actually on the lower hand side because
Hmm.
they make custom equipment, custom parts for large manufacturers,
Hmm.
and so they'll do big giant orders. And there was one order that they had where uh, it was like a $200,000 order, a really sizable order, and they had to build the equipment for the customer, and so it took a really long time to build and fulfill and
Hmm.
define everything. And so what actually needed to happen there, right? And so certain product you could ship out, um, and so the scenario is they didn't really know fully what they could ship out at the end of the day. So they had this big giant order with a bunch of different line items on it, and really what that is if you don't know anything about it, is just standing cash flow. That's not generating revenue for your organization
Right.
until you can ship it out and then you can invoice it, right? And so they were missing real opportunities for improving cash flow,
Hmm.
capturing some of that revenue early. If you've got that really long cycle time, you're basically investing a ton of your own resources without getting paid for a really long time. And so
Right.
how do you invoice? How do you do partial invoicing? How do you, figure out what you can and can't invoice? And then, really doing that in concert with your vendors
Hmm.
was really, really challenging for them. And so we worked with them to kind of design this process that was ultimately meant to, surface information so that their sales team could do, exactly the status of orders, so that they could know exactly what orders needed to be purchased and then what orders they could partially fulfill based off of, what was in their warehouse already.
Hmm.
And so they kind of came to us looking for a few of those different solutions. And the other thing that they had was kind of a different business model kind of embedded into their core business, which was kind of like repairing goods that would come in. And so what we found was that they didn't really have any visibility into how much repairs they had. So they had a warehouse with a big shelves that had all of the repairs that they needed to do. Um, but we just kind of asked them bluntly, like, all right, how much money is sitting here? And nobody knew. And so basically, what that is that's tons and tons of revenue that's sitting on shelves that people are ready for.
Right.
Um, the customer wants it, but they're not going to pay until they actually get the finished good.
Mhm.
And so, really, we helped surface that information, and that helped trigger changes within their business as well, so that they could ultimately say, okay, maybe we need somebody else to help with our repair business. We think we can scale that. And that was just something that was really intuitive and like intuitively surfaced right with mission control. You could see, all right, there's exactly this amount of money sitting here.
Mhm.
um, and they ended up shipping those products much faster.
Amazing.
And then on the distribution side of their business, not the repair side, we saw them drastically kind of improve their cycle time. They got all of the orders out the door very quickly, and they found that their customers were ultimately purchasing more frequently from them.
Nice.
Because they were able to respond exactly around the customer status. Again, if you can imagine that 9-month cycle, okay,
Mhm.
there's a lot of touch points that need to happen in there, right?
Yeah.
And so we help them do that too. It's cool.
Increased sales, increased cash flow. I mean, who does not want that for their business, right?
Yeah,
I love that story. Thanks for sharing that. So,
yeah.
finally, then, what does the future hold for Cavallo and maybe for the industry over the coming year?
Yeah. So super excited about where we're going. What we're focusing on, right at this very moment is really kind of the standard sales documents, quotes, orders, invoice, returns, right? And managing all of those, managing the process for those. Um, but with our workflow engine, we have a ton of opportunity to scale to workflow other things like customers, for example. So, like what you may want to be able to do is design a process for a specific, you know, parameter that your customer falls into, right? So if it's a first-time customer and they buy from you, there's an onboarding experience. It might want to be higher touch, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so there's opportunity for us to workflow that. And then there's using the power of the ERP and the power of our like analytics engine. What we can also do is this gets real like data sciencey, but we can get into
Okay.
things like RFM analysis, which is recency, frequency, and monetary analysis to
Hmm.
help segment your customers so that you can say, okay, this customer is churning, this customer is a loyal customer, this customer is, high value, but always likes to, cut me out from, getting the margin I want, and being able to use that then to drive action automatically. So if you've got a really high value customer that's ordering from you all the time, great, they're good. But if you've got a customer that was ordering from you 5 out of 5 times a month, and then 4 out of 5 times a month, and 3 out of 5 times a month, they're probably already churning.
Right.
And so we can help surface that information, plug them into a process within Mission Control, and help prevent that customer from churning. So that's not there yet, but kind of where we're looking at going, and super excited about some of the potential there for the industry and for us. So yeah.
Yeah, so much to look forward to, and I'm excited to see where that goes. And I just, love the ethos that you have at Cavallo. Your genuine passion for improving the distribution industry, really shines through, and the dedication is clearly breeding just incredible results, not only for you as a company, but also for your customers. And I think it's a testament to what can really happen when you bring together innovative and creative people and put them in the right environment to foster collaboration and innovation. And I'm really looking forward to where that approach kind of takes you next. If you'd like to find out more, you can check them out at cavallo.com. That's cavallo.com. And a massive thanks to Alex for joining me today and to the team at Cavallo for making this episode happen.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me.